Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we were discussing multiplicity issues in testing of hypothesis, and I think we had defined two terms: PCER, that is per comparison error rate, and FWER, that is family wise error rate. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So today we will be discussing few more ways, not few more actually, we did not discuss any way so far to how to handle multiplicity. Okay, so today we'll be discussing a few ways in which we can handle this problem. So the ways by which we can reduce false positives. And why we are doing all this? Because we may have hundreds of variables, thousands of variables, and in such a scenario we would need to reduce the number of variables, so we need to consider only those variables which are genuinely significant. Hence we need to reduce the number of false positives. Is it okay so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So now what are the ways? So one of the easiest ways is known as Bonferroni adjustment. So last time I said that we try to change the threshold or adjust the p values in such a way that the cutoff is changed or the rejection criterion is changed, etc. So Bonferroni adjustment is one such method of p value adjustment. So all these methods come under p value adjustment. So you adjust p values and the revised p values would be such that the false positives would be reduced. Now first question, in terms of p values, generally what is our rejection criterion? In terms of p values, generally what is our rejection criterion?
If p-value is less than the level of significance,
Correct. So
then
if p is less than alpha, then we reject. Correct. Now I want to reduce false positives. If I want to reduce false positives, should I decrease my rejection region or should I expand my rejection region? This is entire possible range of p values, and somewhere here suppose I have alpha. Actually, I mean the diagram is not proportionate, but still somewhere here I have alpha. So currently my rejection region is this. Currently this is my rejection region, correct? So I want to reduce false positives, means I want to reduce false rejections. Effectively it would mean what? Effectively it would mean reducing the rejections, then only false rejections would reduce, correct? So I should decrease this area further or I should increase this area?
I should I should decrease this area actually.
Decrease this area, correct? So I should decrease this area. And now if I want to talk in terms of p values, if I want to reduce the number of p values which are significant, suppose I have say 100 p values and I want to reduce the count of p values which are significant, then what type of adjustment should I do to these p values? Should I somehow scale them up or should I scale them down?
Ma'am, can you repeat?
I have some p values, let me list, say p1, p2 up to p100. I have 100 different p values, each corresponding to one null hypothesis. Currently my rejection criteria is this. So if a p value is less than alpha, I reject. Now I want to reduce the number. Suppose as of now say 45 gets rejected, just an assumption. Okay, so as of now 45 p values are getting rejected. I want to reduce the number of p values that get rejected. So I want to do some sort of adjustment to these p values. So if I want to reduce this count of rejections, should I scale up the p values or should I scale them down? Increasing p values would lead to less rejections or decreasing p values would lead to less rejections?
Increase in p
increasing.
values.
Correct. So if I scale them up, then some of them would go beyond alpha and then they would end up in the acceptance region. Okay, so all these p-value adjustments are generally in some way or other trying to up the p-values, trying to increase the p-values. Okay, so Bonferroni adjustment is the simplest one. So it says that the adjusted p-value would be, okay, so I need to define some notations first. So let the number of variables or the number of tests that I am performing, let the number of tests being performed be denoted by G. Okay, capital G. Capital G is the number of tests that we are performing. So the P adjusted we would define as minimum of G times the original P comma 1. Okay. So adjusted p-value is defined as minimum of G times the original p-value comma 1. So what I am doing, I am basically multiplying the p-value by G. Would it scale it up?
Yes.
Correct. But then the problem is sometimes it may go beyond 1 and we want p-values to be between 0 and 1, right? For example, if my G is say 1000, if my G is say 1000 and suppose my original p-value for a certain test is let's say 0.01, then G into P becomes 10. Am I right? And this is of course unacceptable because p-value is supposed to be between 0 and 1. Hence we put this condition that if G into P origin is becoming greater than 1, we will take 1 as the p-value. Is it okay? Is the formula clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now what is the logic behind this G into P origin? Why this? So effectively what we are now trying is G into P origin should be less than alpha for rejection. Correct? After p-value adjustment my rejection criterion becomes this. So it becomes P origin should be less than alpha by G. Okay. As a result, my new rejection region is very small, maybe something like this. Right? It is part of original rejection region was 0 to alpha, but now the new rejection region is simply 0 to alpha by G. So it is very small because G is large, so alpha by G is very small compared to alpha. Is it okay? So we are reducing the rejection region by doing this scaling up of p-values. Is the logic clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is known as Bonferroni adjustment. This is probably the most basic method of controlling multiplicity. But now you can imagine what implications it would have. Yes, we are significantly reducing the number of false positive. No worries about that. But then what is the byproduct of that? What would happen if I reduce my type 1 error too much? If I reduce my type 1 error too much, what would happen?
Type 2 error will increase.
Type 2 error will increase. We know these errors are kind of duals of each other. So this method, even though it is simple, it may increase false negatives substantially. Okay. Hence, this is not a very popular method. Of course, it exists and people do use it, but they generally use it when they can afford to have false negatives. Okay. So it increases false negatives substantially. There is another method which is known as Sidak's adjustment. Okay, what does Sidak's adjustment do? So it says that the new p value or the adjusted p value should be 1 minus original p value raised to g. Okay, g is again my number of total number of tests. 1 minus original p value raised to g. What will happen to this value as g goes to infinity? Any idea?
It will be 1.
As g goes to infinity, it would still be 1. Okay, and is it always between 0 1? Is this quantity always between 0 1?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
and what can we say about this Bonferroni adjusted value and Sidak's value? Which one is going to be larger? Which one is going to be smaller? Can we say something? Can we say something? So, can I say that this value is either always larger or always smaller than the Bonferroni adjusted p value?
Ma'am, the p-value in the Sidak's adjustment is the observed p-value.
Observed means what?
The what have you written in the suffix? Actually, I'm not getting it.
Original,
Okay,
original,
okay. Original. Okay.
original. So adjusted p values are computed using the original p values that we get from the tests.
Ma'am, the Sidak's one will be the larger.
Larger, okay. Why?
Yes. Ma'am, note that here, whatever 1 minus p original to the power g is actually decreasing in a bit faster. Okay, and thus it will be very small, and again subtracting it from 1, it will make the quantity larger than the above one,
Okay,
I
what
guess.
about others? Do they agree with him or you have some difference of opinion?
I think CDAX will be lower than this Bonferroni
Why?
because we have a condition like CDAC would be always lesser than 1, but Bonferroni would go to 1 very easy.
Okay, okay. Now, can either of you prove your argument mathematically? Because one of them has to be wrong, right? Both can't be correct.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Uh, Actually, I want to comment on that. That 1 minus p original raised to g.
Hmm.
So if we expand it,
Hmm.
it will be some binomial expansion, and in that somewhere there will be g into p original will be there.
Okay, give me a couple of terms of expansion.
Uh, P original raised to g, or okay, minus gc2 minus 1 p original raised to g, p original.
Is it correct? Whatever I
Yes,
have written.
gc2, I guess.
No, it would start with GC0 then GC1, no?
Oh, yeah, yes, yes.
Yes, then plus something and something like this. Okay. So this is 1 minus G P orish and in some other terms. Okay. So when I write P new, it would be 1 minus GP orish and in terms containing P orish square or higher, correct? Some terms containing. So I should write f of p over h square. Okay, does that help others? Does that help in proving one way or other whether SIDAC is less or Bonferroni adjusted is smaller? Okay, so if you can't do it now, it's homework. It is you have to do it. So if you can't do it now, you have to do it at home.
Ma'am, I think actually it will tell that Bonferroni is actually greater, because now if you cancel now if you just put out the bracket,
Mm-hmm.
and what will it happen? Actually 1 minus 1 plus g into p orig,
Hmm.
right? uh, and thus it will be equals to g into p orig plus a minus.
But I am
Okay.
plus minus both types of terms, so you cannot. I mean, I have positive
G,
as well as negative terms here, plus minus anything.
no. There will be g orig. Then the term will continue from minus g orig minus uh, p. Sorry, g into p orig minus
Hmm.
uh,
G choose 2
g choose to p
p
orig
over
square.
square. Hmm. But then next term will be plus, na? Next term will be plus g choose
Okay.
3, na? Am I
Hmm.
right?
And then what if we just take the minus thing common, and just
Okay.
conclude that it is just subtracted from the Bonferroni
If I
thing?
take minus thing common, fine. I
Yes.
listen to you. No, don't worry. So, uh, okay. But what is the guarantee that the inside thing is positive?
Is positive. Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guarantee?
That is the that
Yeah.
is the thing. Yeah.
See, I know
Uh, since
mathematics is interesting and easy, but not so easy that it could tell you whatever you want.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
uh, hello ma'am,
Yes,
since your p values are between 0 and 1,
correct,
your squares and larger powers will be still less.
correct. So,
So even if that is negative or positive,
G
that
choose
will
G.
be
Wait. G choose 2, G choose 3. Also, you need to compare. Na? You can't simply compare P over
uh,
H square, P over H cube.
yes.
G choose 3 might be larger than G choose 2. You generally have such type of pattern in those coefficients, right? First they increase and then they decrease. Okay, it's a nice homework. You don't, I mean, don't make me do everything. So, homework is SIDAC adjusted p value and Bonferroni adjusted p value. What is the relationship? Greater, less? I hope not equal. Does everyone agree that they are not equal? Or is there possibility of them being equal? Yes?
No, ma'am, they are not equal.
Okay, why?
Ma'am, because SIDAC would have a value lesser than 1, but in not specifically Bonferroni could have value 1 in that case.
Okay, Bonferroni could
Like,
have value equal to 1, so at least in some cases they have to be different. Fine. And what
yes, ma'am.
about other cases? Other cases they could be equal. You don't know. Fine.
Uh,
But fine, you have given at least one valid reason why they won't be always equal. That's enough for us. So now we have to check, is one always greater than the other or is one always less than the other? Mathematically try to prove it. Okay? Okay. So, but SIDAC also has this inflation of false negatives issue. So, even in SIDAC, your false negatives do get inflamed. Okay? Inflated. Sorry, not inflamed. Inflated. Okay. So, hence people were not completely happy with this. They were still looking out for some other techniques. And one such technique that came into use later is known as false discovery rate. Okay, it is known as FDR. FDR is false discovery rate. So how is FDR defined? So out of all the discoveries, you have to see how many are false discoveries. That is how false discovery rate is defined. So yesterday we had made a table. So this is suppose actually, sorry. So actual H naught, whether it is true or false, and then I have conclusion from the test. Whether it is true or false. Okay, suppose this is U, V, W, Z, something like this, and then I call this as R, this is G minus R, so total is G. Out of them, let this be say G naught, so this would be G minus G naught. So G naught is the number of true null hypothesis. Okay, G naught is the number of true null hypothesis. R is the number of rejections. G naught would of course be unknown, R would be known, U, V, W, Z would be unknown. Okay, so what is false discovery rate? False discovery rate is defined as how many discoveries are there, and out of them how many are false. So by discoveries, again you mean how many significant results are there. Okay, generally significant result is a discovery, non-significant result is generally not a discovery. So significant result means R. Out of these R rejections, how many are false rejections? Expectation of that is known as false discovery rate if R is not equal to 0. Because if R is equal to 0, what can I say about V? If R is equal to 0, what can I say about V?
V will also 0.
V will also be 0 because my V plus Z is R. So V has to be always less than or equal to R. So in that case, it will be 0 by 0, which is undefined. So we define FDR separately at 0 if R is equal to 0. Okay. So FDR is defined as expectation of V by R if R is not equal to 0, and it is defined as 0 if R is equal to 0. Okay so far? Is the definition clear of false discovery rate?
Yes, ma'am.
Now we have to see, is there any relationship between PCER, FWER and FDR? Okay. So in these notations, what is PCER? PCER is V upon G, number of false positives out of total, ideally expectation of V by G. Okay, and family wise error rate would be probability of V greater than or equal to 1, correct? Expectation of at least one false positive. Okay, so now we have to see, is there any relationship between any of these guys? First, let us try to see between PCER and FWER. Okay, if V is equal to 0, then what happens? PCER is 0. Okay, and FWER is also 0, correct? Because if V is 0, almost surely, it's a random variable, so I should write almost surely. I cannot write equal to single number. Means if 0 is the only value that V takes, then PCER is also going to be 0 and FWER is also going to be 0 because the entire probability is concentrated at 0. Okay so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if V is positive, if V is positive, is there any relationship between V by G and expectation of V by G and probability of V greater than or equal to 1? Is there any relationship? Yes? Any suggestions, guesses? Can I write this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes. Any other suggestions to find relationship between these things? If you want, you can find relationship between this and FDR also. That is also anyway on the table. So I want finally relationship between FDR also. So expectation of V by R also comes in picture. If you can say something about that.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
In this probability of V greater than equal to 1,
Mm-hmm.
this we are considering case for V greater than 0. Na?
Okay. Yes.
So can we do something of that probability of V equal to 0?
Yes. What should we do? Tell me. If you want to combine and then you can conclude, that is also fine. Yes, everyone is supposed to contribute. Think.
Ma'am, probability of V greater than equals to 1, can we think it in terms of Markov uh, inequality?
Okay, tell me. What do you want to write?
Is less than equals to
Hmm?
expectation of V
Hmm?
by 1.
Okay. Okay. So probability of V greater than or equal to 1 is less than equal to expectation of V. Fine. What next?
Here G is also a random variable, right?
Yes, G is also random variable.
Hmm.
See, these two look similar. Establishing relationship between them might be easier. What do I know about R and G? Is there any relationship between R and G? Is there any relationship between R and G?
R
R
is
is
less than equal to G.
Correct. So number of rejections cannot exceed total number of tests. So R is less than or equal to G. So V by R would always be greater than or equal to V by G. Am I right? Or no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So by monotonicity of expectation from probability theory, can I say that expectation of V by R is greater than or equal to expectation of V by G?
Yes, ma'am.
So what is expectation of V by R? FDR would always be greater than or equal to PCER. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Of course, I'm ignoring the zero case, but in that case, both will be zero. If number of rejections is zero, in that case, both will be zero. So I don't need to worry about that. So can I say this, that FDR is always greater than or equal to PCER? Now I have to see if I can find some relationship between FDR, FWER, means either this and this. Okay. So let me try that. So what I know about FDR is FDR would be equal to expectation of V by R given R is greater than 0 into probability of R greater than 0. Correct? Ideally this is the scenario. Plus 0 times probability of R equal to 0. Is this okay? Can I write this? One value of FDR is expectation of V by R. It is true only when R is greater than 0. So I have to multiply by the conditioning event. And the remaining value is 0, which happens when probability of
Yes,
R
ma'am.
is
Yes,
equal
ma'am.
to 0. So this part anyway is 0. I don't need to worry about it. So this is expectation of V by R given R greater than 0 into probability of R greater than 0. Okay. And what I know is V is equal to 0 would imply V by R equal to 0. Okay. If V is 0, V by R would also be 0. Of course, I am considering the case R not equal to 0 because I am worried about only this part. And otherwise V by R is going to be between 0 and 1. Okay. So can I say that V by R is less than or equal to indicator of V greater than or equal to 1? Now this is slightly what do you call non-trivial step. This doesn't come naturally to us, but try to think what we are doing. So indicator function, what are the possible values of any indicator function?
0 and 1.
0 and 1. So when would this be 0? The indicator of V greater than or equal to 1 would be 0 if this event does not happen. Correct. This event does not happen means if V is equal to 0. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if V is equal to 0, then this RHS is 0. But we know that in that case LHS is also 0. So
Yes.
the equality holds. And if V is not equal to 0, then RHS is 1 and LHS is less than or equal to 1. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So I can write that V by R is always less than or equal to indicator of V greater than or equal to 1. Everyone with me so far?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So now I will again use monotonicity of expectation. So expectation of V by R will be less than or equal to expectation of indicator of this. And what is expectation of an indicator function?
It will be the probability of V greater than equals to. Yes.
Correct. Expectation of indicator function is a Bernoulli random variable 0 1. expectation of a Bernoulli random variable is probability of the success. So it is, this expectation is actually probability of v greater than or equal to 1, and here I already have expectation of v by r, and in this scenario we are anyway focusing on this scenario. So in this scenario I know that this is FDR and this is FWER. So FDR is always less than or equal to FWER. Okay. Okay so far?
Yes, ma'am.
But all this is under assumption that at least some of the hypotheses are not true. Okay, so G naught is less than G. This is all under this assumption. What is G naught? G naught is proportion number of true null hypotheses. So if all the hypotheses are true, then things are even simpler. Okay, if G naught is equal to G, then what happens? If all the hypotheses are true, then whatever rejections you have, all are false rejections. So v is equal to R. Okay, so in that case expectation of v by R would simply be probability of v by R equal to 1. Correct, because there is no non-false positives, means true positives, there are no true positives, and this is nothing but same as probability of R not equal to 0, which is same as probability of v not equal to 0, because v and R are exactly same, which is same as probability of v greater than or equal to 0. So if G naught is equal to G, then your FDR is actually equal to FWER. Is it okay? I know I went a bit fast here, so try to see if it is okay. Is it making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So what is the conclusion then? Here I proved FDR is greater than PCER. Now I am proving FDR is less than FWER. So overall scenario is something like this. PCER is here, FDR is somewhere here, and FWER is somewhere here. Again, these proportion, it is not a proportionate diagram. I just want to indicate their relative locations. Okay. Now what does Bonferroni do? Bonferroni procedure and SIDAC procedure, they actually try to control FWER. They try to keep FWER below 5%. Okay. If they are keeping FWER below 5%, then of course automatically FDR and PCER will also be below 5%. Okay. So Bonferroni and SIDAC, both these procedures try to control family wise error rate. They try to give an upper bound to family wise error rate which is equal to our level of significance. Okay. So they control FWER, make it below 5%. As a result, FDR will also be below 5% and PCR will also be automatically below 5%. Your normal procedures, means without any adjustment, they try to control only only PCER. Okay, without any adjustments. We know that here there are too many false positives, and now we know that here there are too many false negatives. That's why people thought of this measure, which is kind of intermediate. So they thought that we would control this instead of this and this. So it would be intermediate number of false positives and intermediate number of false negatives. Okay. So that's where FDR control procedures came into picture. So what does FDR control procedure means? So how do you control FDR? So you know how do you control FWER? You have two methods at least, Bonferroni and SIDAC. How do you control FDR? So for controlling FDR, the suggested procedure is as follows. It is kind of a sequential procedure. So procedure to control FDR. Why? Because it is kind of an intermediate measure. So arrange p values in an ascending order. Okay, arrange all your p values in an ascending order. So I have p1, p2, pg. Okay, of course it means that this is the least significant. In fact, it may also be 1, it need not even be significant, and this is corresponding to the most significant hypothesis. Is it okay? Is the first step clear? Let
Yes, ma'am.
p naught be the proportion of null hypotheses which are true. P naught be the proportion of null hypotheses which are true. So P naught is actually G naught upon G. Of course, this is unknown in almost all the cases. Okay, so if it is unknown, we take a conservative approach. In fact, almost all the cases it is unknown. If it is unknown, take P naught to be 1. Why this is a conservative approach? If we are taking P naught to be 1, we are assuming that G naught is almost G. So we are assuming that all the null hypotheses are actually true. So whatever rejections are there, all are false rejections. Okay, so this is the most conservative approach. Then what you do, starting from G, that is starting from the end point here, so starting from PG, gth order p value, we find first I alpha such that p ordered that I alpha is less than alpha times I alpha upon p naught G. Okay, so let me explain what does this mean. So I have ordered p values, so p1, p2 up to pg. For each of them I have to compute alpha I alpha upon p naught. I will take as 1, so alpha I alpha upon G. So for p1 it will be alpha by G. For p2 it will be 2 alpha by G. For p ordered 3 it will be 3 alpha by G, and for the last one it would simply be alpha, G alpha by G, so alpha. Now at every step we have to check, starting from here we have to check whether pg is less than alpha. If p ordered G is less than alpha, then that itself becomes my I alpha, and I should write fourth step, reject H naughts corresponding to P1, P2 up to P I alpha. Okay, so let me explain. So if P ordered G itself is less than alpha, then we say that even with the adjustment, all the H naughts should be rejected. Okay. If suppose now Pg is greater than alpha, then you check P ordered G minus 1. Suppose that is also greater than G minus 1 alpha by G, etc, etc, etc. So somewhere you end up at a point where for the first time the relationship is reversed. Okay, so you have some pi alpha that you call as I alpha, and then I alpha alpha by G, the relationship is reversed. In that case you say that H naughts corresponding to all these p values should be rejected. Okay, the remaining H naughts should not be rejected. Only the H naughts corresponding to all the p values which are less than this I alpha thing should be rejected. Is it clear what I am saying here? Am I still connected?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, are you following what is happening here?
Ma'am, can you please repeat the third step? Like, can you please explain?
Okay. So, see, look at this example. You have arranged p values in the ascending order, so you write them like this: p1, p2, p3 up to pg. Okay, then because this is first p value, I will simply take alpha by g here. In this column I will write simply alpha by g. In this, for second p value, I will write 2 alpha by g, 3 alpha by g, up to last one will be g alpha by g, that is alpha. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then now I have to compare first column and second column, but I have to do row wise comparison starting from down. Okay, starting from down. So I will see whether p order g is less than alpha. Then I will, if p order g itself is less than alpha, then I will say okay, all the null hypothesis should be rejected. If suppose p order g is greater than alpha, then I go to the next hypothesis. So I will check whether p order g minus 1 is less than this. So I will go on checking till I get a point where p ordered I alpha is less than the corresponding cutoff in that row. So it will be I alpha into alpha upon g. Okay, this is the first point when I am checking from this direction, at which this inequality sign is this way. Okay, for all the other rows it was this way, suppose. Then we will say that from this hypothesis and then all the p value, all the hypotheses whose p values are less than this p value, all these should be rejected and all the remaining hypotheses should be accepted, not rejected. Is it okay?
Ma'am, from this I have two questions. In this step
Yes.
2, okay,
Huh.
are there certain cases where the p naught cannot be determined or is unknown?
It's always unknown, that's what I wrote. If it is unknown, take p naught equal to 1, and that's why here I am taking p naught equal to 1. Almost 99.99% of the times p naught is going to be unknown, so we take p naught equal to 1 in that case, the most conservative approach.
In the third step, why that fraction has been on the right hand side, it is chosen to be like that.
Okay, there is an entire research paper devoted to that, you'll have to read it.
Okay.
Actually, see, I am not going into this cutoff, how they derived this cutoff, because it's not that simple to be covered in an MSc class. Okay, so the two people who discovered this, they are I think Benjamini and Hochberg. I'm not very sure about my spellings, but mostly it should be correct. So check this, Benjamini and Hochberg. So they wrote this paper and it was very phenomenal. So they have given derivation of this criterion. Okay, in that paper they discuss, I think it's a paper from JASA, American Statistical Association, Journal of American Statistical Association, not sure, but some very big journal. So they have given a derivation of this cutoff, how they arrive at this cutoff and how it ensures that, what does this cutoff do? Yeah, so using, I mean, doing this, what are you achieving? So if you use this criterion, so instead of simply comparing every p value with alpha, if you do all these big things, then what happens? Then your FDR remains below alpha instead of just PCER. Okay, if you simply do your usual thing like compare p value with alpha, decide to reject, if p value is less than alpha, accept otherwise, then only your PCR is less than alpha, and as a result you get too many false positives. Whereas if you follow the procedure that we discussed just now, then FDR becomes less than alpha, automatically it means PCR is further less, so it is also less than alpha, and then your number of false positives reduces significantly. Okay, so that's why they have suggested this adjustment. But why to follow this procedure, means why to arrange them and why to go from bottom and why to use this particular cutoff, all these things you can find in this paper. Okay, I won't be able to discuss those because many of you may not be interested and it will take a lot of time.
Okay,
But
ma'am.
mechanically, have you understood the procedure, how to control, why to use that particular cutoff? Yes, I have not explained, but have you understood the procedure mechanically?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is known as FDR control procedure. So if you use this, then your FDR will be below alpha and PCER would automatically be below alpha, but FWER did not be below alpha. As a result, your false negatives may not increase that much. Okay, so you will have a moderate number of false positives and a moderate number of false negatives. Okay, I think I have already exceeded my time. So these were some of the techniques by which multiplicity can be controlled. Of course, there is lot of research going on in this area, so people have developed many further things, like stepwise procedures are there for p-value adjustment, sequential procedures are there, and so on. So those who are interested can read. In fact, some of you this could possibly be one of the project topics also, exploring all such methods, maybe developing new method, comparing methods, etc., etc. So for now, let me stop here. Thank you.